Hi, and good afternoon. Welcome to another in our webinar series around looking at understanding what's happening in the UK skills space. As always, I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Elena Magrini. Hi, Elena. How are you?
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, and I'm very excited about today's topic, which is the UK skills revolution. And I think as people that are tuning in will see that there's been obviously a lot of change in the last 6 to 12 months. Kept Elena and our research team very busy, and our client services and sales team very busy. We've got a new government. We've got lots of policies being announced just in the last week. There's reviews of educational systems. There's reviews of kind of getting young people into work. And so, with all these white papers that are coming out, with all these challenges, I think today's a really good opportunity to kind of talk through some research that we've done, both in the US and in the UK, around the skills revolution and how roles are evolving at a rapid pace, so that we can try and get a bit more insight into what needs to be true in terms of the skills ecosystem, funding, agility, etc. Today's agenda, obviously, I'll for people that aren't familiar with who we are about Lightcast, I'll explain what we do in a second, and then we've got the context of the actual paper that we've got on the situation, and Elena's going to walk us through the report that we've done, how we measure skills disruption. I'll talk a little bit about Skills England's priorities, because we know now Skills England are starting to bring a little bit more policy, a little bit more understanding to the table. We'll look then at key takeaways, what does it all mean, and then resources that are available for you to access following this webinar. So a little bit around Lightcast. Who are we? We're the world's leading company when it comes to global labour market data and intelligence. And our mission is really to unlock those new possibilities in the labour market. And we do that by providing trusted data, analytics, expert guidance for people like Elena in our thought leadership team, William and his team in our research and professional services team as well. And we do that at national, regional, local, global level. You know, we operate in so many countries now, and just making sure that we support employers and educators and government as they kind of seek to make those informed decisions on how work is evolving and how complex it is. Our data includes structural data, so we get lots of data from His Majesty's government that helps us look at projections and where roles have evolved. But we also use our own proprietary job posting and analytics and skills data, along with professional profiles. We've been doing that for over 2 decades, and so that gives us a really good grounding and base around what is happening in the UK skills market, what's happening in the UK labour market in general as well. And then in terms of our solutions, well, we are a data company first and foremost, but we provide our data in lots of different guises. We have lots of clients that enjoy using our data and value our data through our software solutions with products like Analyst, Career Coach, etc. But also we have a lot of our clients that access direct data feeds through our API, Snowflake, data solutions. And also we have people that pay for research. And so Elena's done a massive amount of research in the UK space over the last few years. And so that's available to people as well. So in terms of the context and a skills system in terms of urgent reform, I mean, obviously what we have seen in the past 8 months of this new government is a lot of white papers, a lot of kind of conversation around how things will change. First and foremost was Skills England around that change. And so Skills England will start to subsume a lot of those existing bodies within the skills infrastructure. So IFE, and we'll start to be subsumed into that amongst other things. And Skills England, rather than sitting at the side of the Department of Education, will sit in the Department of Education. So that's a real policy change and a real policy shift, coupled obviously with devolution. And people that have seen our previous webinars around devolution, we're seeing a lot more sweeping powers handed to devolved areas, metro mayors, more and more devolved funding, you know, particularly within the adult space, which I think, and I know Elena shares that opinion, is critical for the short and medium term skills solutions that we need resolving in the UK. There's certainly a lot more push around that. But obviously, in terms of the wider context, the rise of AI, people remember towards the end of last year, we did a series of webinars and training sessions around AI and how that's starting to have an impact, not just within the tech space, but actually broadly across all of the UK employment infrastructure. Green transition, it's a big part of what the last government, the successive government now, net zero is a big part of what they're wanting to do. Digital transformation, roles will evolve, automation as well as AI. Things are kind of moving through there. Sluggish productivity growth. We've still got a lot of people that are unemployed. Ultimately, that has a massive impact around productivity, and people are naturally leaning towards whether automation can solve some of those challenges. Regional equalities. We had levelling up in the previous government. There's still challenges around kind of north-south divide, but also within those sub-regions where there's opportunities and challenges as well. Demographic changes. We're in a massive demographic uplift around 16 to 19-year-olds at the minute, which we know our college partners are enjoying and seeing big growth in those numbers. But as we know, demographic kind of is a bit of a roller coaster, and by 2030 we'll start to see a demographic decline in that area, and also then some knock-on issues around adult numbers and HE numbers potentially moving forward. Labour mobility is a big part of that. How portable are those roles? How can people get from one area to another? And then the increased competitiveness. We've seen, post-COVID, particularly in a lot of the service sectors, a real challenge around supply and demand, and we've seen salaries go up, competitiveness gone up really high, and particularly in the tech sector, very competitive space to fill as well. So a lot going off, a lot for us to unpick, and I'm delighted now to hand over to Elena to work through the research that we've done on the UK regional skills.
Yes, I mean, there's lots of going on in the labor market. There's a lot of moving parts, both in terms of the economy, but also, as you say, in terms of the reform in the system that are happening at the moment. And for us, being a data company, it comes as a no-brainer that any change should be built on a data-driven evidence base. And so we thought we'd build one for the reforms that are currently underway, so that we are taking away the guesswork and try to be led by the data when it comes to understanding skills dynamics and what we need to do about them. So we created the UK Skills Revolution report, which is basically a report in which we try to measure the skills disruption in the UK in each occupation across all different parts of the labor market, to identify the areas that have been that are being most affected and impacted by changes. And then, because obviously any research has even more value when it is grounded and linked to policy, we also deep dive into 4 particular areas, priority sectors that have been highlighted by Skills England as areas that particularly need work and reform, to showcase how labor market data can help achieve Skills England goals. So what I'm going to do now is, for the first part, I'm going to show you some of the overarching findings from the research and our skills disruption metrics. And then on the second part, we're going to look at how that applies to the priority sectors for Skills England. So first of all, one slide of methodology. Bear with me with this one, just to explain how we did what we did. For this type of research, we've been leveraging our online job postings dataset, which is a dataset that contains over 80 million job postings collected in the UK since 2012. And in particular, we focused on the past 3 years, so from 2021 to 2024. And we wanted to analyze and map the skills requirement for each occupation in the UK labour market, both in 2021 and in 2024. And why we wanted to map these two? Because we wanted to compare one with the other to understand how much change there has been in the skills requirement in each of the occupation. We measure the change for each combination of occupation and skill, and then brought them all together, all these numbers together, to create one number of capturing the change in each occupation, and then we rank occupation based on this number, which we normalize on a scale from 0 to 100, with 100 being the occupation that has seen the most change in terms of skills competition, and 0 being the occupation that has seen the least change. And on average, what we found by doing this exercise is that across all occupations in the UK, 33% of the top 20 requested skills have changed since 2021. So this is quite a change. It's actually in line with some of the findings that we found for the US as well, where actually slightly higher, because in the US it was 32%, but still it paints a picture of a labor market that is changing fast. The point, though, is that not every part of the labor market is changing at the same pace. So, the first thing we did, even before going into the specifics of each occupation, we took a look at career areas, and we wanted to understand which were the parts, the sectors, career areas in the labor market that are being most affected by these changes. And here you see that by using our own occupations taxonomy, so organizing career areas by using the Likecast occupations taxonomy, what we found is that IT and computer science was actually the career area where occupations saw the biggest skill changes between 2021 and 2024, followed by marketing and public relations, design, media, and writing. Whereas on the other end, we found that a whole range of industries or career areas actually haven't seen much disruption in terms of the skills requirements. These include the career areas around transportation, but also community and social services, performing arts, and education. The interesting thing here is that these career areas where there has been the smallest changes in terms of skill requirements are actually industries that are particularly skills and labor intensives, whereas the ones at the top are those occupations that are a little bit less labor intensive, but they've seen bigger changes in terms of skills requirement. And then just to give you a flavor for it, here you can find the top 10 occupations that have changed the most since 2021 in terms of the skills requirements. And what you can see is that the majority, 6 out of 10, are occupations linked to IT, with mobile applications developer being the occupation that actually has seen the biggest change since 2021. But it is not just IT occupations. There are some other occupations too that are being affected in business and support roles, such as sales representatives, but also chief operating officers, as well as product owners and technical writers. So a range of occupation, IT, but also business and support roles.
I think that's a fascinating start to this report, and certainly it reminds me of a piece of research I read towards the end of last year, which was by the National Foundation for Educational Research, and they looked at projections up to 2035. And some of those jobs, like you said, that are a bit more labour intensive, so retail, hospitality, business administration, elementary type jobs, there's a prediction there that within the UK, we could lose 1 million of those jobs due to automation alone. And so the interesting thing and the challenge, I think, for employers and for educators and for policyholders is those people generally tend to kind of gravitate within the area that they're comfortable with. So do very little CPD. The world generally have kind of lower level qualifications and very little CPD outside of those areas that they already work in. They might move from one coffee shop to another coffee shop, one warehouse company to another warehouse company, one admin job to another admin job. So I think that immediately for me is a real big opportunity around how do we support those people where we know those jobs are going to disappear up to 2035 in the next 10 years due to automation alone. Where do we support around policy and funding now to be able to get those people into those jobs where they can have more sustainable work, more better paid work. So I think it's fascinating to see that across that mix of roles as well.
Yeah, and I mean, Ben, you're saying it, but the key element here is then how this does all fit with policy and how we can prepare for these changes. And you mentioned it before, but adult learning and continuous development will play a key role. So I think now is great time to actually discuss some of the priorities within the Skills England report.
So yeah, Elena, thank you for kind of teeing me up for the Skills England priority sectors. And I think what's fascinating is the kind of challenges we've already talked about in the short and medium term skills evolution. So digital technologies, for example, I think is really relevant in that three-quarters of those occupations also require basic digital skills, whereas 56% require specific digital skills and a handful require AI. And certainly when I talk to employers, through our education and government clients, that's kind of the feedback they get, is that they get young employees that are very tech savvy but can't send an email, can't put a Word document together or a spreadsheet. So I think there's a need there to think about that. In terms of green, obviously green's been a priority for the last few governments, but really, if we think about green jobs in the last couple of years, from 2020 to 2022, we saw 4 times the rate of overall growth. And again, that won't diminish, and it won't diminish if I go down to the bottom right, which is house building and construction, because the government set quite an ambitious target, and it's been talked about in the last 2 weeks about how quickly they want to do that. But obviously, house building will generate a tremendous amount of kind of upskilling of the current workforce, the requirements around green, the requirements around digital technology and automation. And then finally, I think, which is the most essential one out of that, is life sciences. And we know in the last 10, 15 years, we've struggled in the UK around recruitment and retention in roles like adult healthcare, doctors, nurses. That's become even more of a challenge, I think, post Brexit, particularly, and post COVID. And so it's a real challenge. You know, we always project those growth in jobs because we're getting older and we need more people to look after us. The reality is, you know, getting those younger generations to be inspired to want to work in that sector, amazing sectors that they are, but we need at least 133,000 people to work in that to help the forecasted skills growth. So thinking about the previous slide, we were talking about people that work in care and how that role could be so easily, through skills analysis, it could so easily linked to customer service, so easily linked to engaging with the general public. Well, those people that might be at risk of their job disappearing up to 2035, care would be a nice segue for them to work into. So lots of new things, but lots of very familiar things, I think, Elena, as well, in terms of government priorities. So I'll hand back to you now to look at AI.
Yes. So we have these findings from Skills England in terms of the priority areas that the government wants to invest in and understand a little bit better. And what we did here is try to use some of our data to understand a little bit more some of the findings that emerge from the research from Skills England. So the first thing was that they mentioned a lot of digital skills, digital skill requirements, but also one of the priorities for Skills England is to understand the impact of AI and how that is affecting the labor market. And this is even more a priority when you actually look at the number and you see that compared to a decade ago, demand for AI skills in the labor market has skyrocketed pretty much across a whole range of type of artificial intelligence. So we see machine learning has been growing quite a lot, but we're also seeing new type of AI like generative AI also coming up and increasing in demand. Actually, you might not see super well from here, and that's because it's been very flat for a long time, and then all of a sudden in 2023 we see an uptick in terms of demand for generative AI. So there's a lot of growth, and it's been rapid growth just in over 10 years in terms of AI. And the other thing that we're seeing here, and I think this is the most important part when it comes to then policy, is that AI is no longer just impacting IT occupations. And as Ben mentioned at the beginning, we ran a whole series specifically on AI just before before Christmas. But one of the key findings from that series was that when we look at generative AI in particular, so this is the likes of ChatGPT and other language models that are used to create content and summarize things for us and give us ideas. Actually, what we're seeing is that the demand for this type of tools and therefore the demand for workers that can use this tool has really increased in the last 30 years. We see it in terms of IT occupations, such as software developers. Just over 31,000 job postings in 2021 require this type of skills. We are nearly getting to 180,000 job postings requiring this type of skills in 2024. Same data scientists, very tiny number, low numbers for 2021, big growth to 2024. But it is not just IT occupations. Now we see a lot of research roles also requiring this type of skills, and also roles related to product management, compliance management, technical writers. Writers themselves and biologists, interpreters. Generative AI is kind of democratizing the access to AI in a way that we haven't seen before. And this has a lot of implication in the way we are doing the work, especially because it helps us doing our work better. So there's lots of implication in it in terms of how this is changing the skills landscape. Moving on to green, that was the second area highlighted in the Skills England report. And one of the things highlighted in the report was that there's a lot of demand and growing demand for green jobs, with green jobs growing much faster than the rest of the labor market in the UK. And that's very true, very important. But the other thing that we are seeing from our data is that it isn't just that new green jobs are emerging, that we didn't see before. But for the most part, the wider labor market is also becoming greener. So the government is totally right in focusing on those jobs, those new emerging jobs that are becoming important as part of the green transition. But we should not forget that a lot of existing jobs will change too because of this transition. And so increasingly what we are seeing is that roles related to project management, engineering roles, and construction role as well require green skills. So yes, there are new green occupations emerging, but there's also a greening of the labor market, greening occupations that is equally as important, if not more important, when it comes to upskilling and retraining in particular. And to that point, because the demand for green is so high, and there's such a impending need for government to fill roles related to the green transition, it's really important to try understand where we can find these workers in other parts of the labor market. And I think, Ben, you mentioned completely different sectors before. None of them had to particularly do with the green sector. But the logic is similar. We need to find workers within sectors that are already green, but also other sectors that have similar skills profile, so that we can help fill the gap and meet the requirement of the green economy by helping tapping into the potential of workers that already have some of the skills that are needed to succeed in green jobs, and then upskill and retrain them to make that last step into green jobs. And here, for example, we've used our career pathways tool to try and understand what it takes for an electrical engineer to turn into a solar engineer. And these are some of the skills listed here are some of the gaps that needs to be filled in between one and the other. The two occupations are not massively different. Actually, they have quite a lot of things in common. And adding this type of skills to an electrical engineer would help turn them into solar engineering, opening up a whole potential for tapping jobs related to solar engineering.
I think this is fascinating as well, Elena, in that this for me highlights one of the real challenges we have around qualifications versus skills-based economy,
Yes.
in that we still have a system that's very kind of qualification driven, full qualification funding driven, and I think it's a really interesting policy challenge for the government, particularly around devolution, is how quickly can they work with the likes of awarding bodies, they can work with the likes of educators and employers to develop these kind of rapid, agile, short qualifications. Because when you break it down, like you said, there's a lot of skills transferability around a lot of roles. And this, to upskill from electrical engineer to solar engineer, it's not necessarily the traditional qualification certificate type approach. It's thinking about the agility of how do we quickly fill those gaps, isn't it?
It's so important what you're mentioning there, because it's we don't need to start from scratch. A lot of the components are already there, and we just need to be more agile. And I think agility will be a word that will come up a few times here today, because the faster the labor market is changing, the faster we need to be, the more agile we need to be in responding to it, rather than sticking to 3 years courses, or like longer courses. So absolutely. And I mean, on that point, I mean, it's such a nice segue also for the next section, which is construction and house building, because here again, the goal is, how do we meet the target of 1.5 million homes being built? Well, you need workers to enter the sector. And what we are seeing is that demand for a lot of construction roles is high, and it is rising. What you see here are the top 10 occupations that are currently most in demand in the construction labor market. And what you're seeing is the growth that these occupations have seen over the past 3 years. So quantity surveyors, laborers, grounds workers, they are among the occupations that we're currently looking to recruit the most when it comes to construction. And this demand has increased by 17, 25, and 34% respectively, just over the past 3 years. So then again, the questions that we have is, how do we meet the requirements? How can we attract people to the sector and scale them so that we can meet these requirements? And again, by using our career pathways tool, we can draw an example of how you can draw from an occupation that is currently outside the construction sector, somebody that works in warehousing and distribution as a supervisor, and what kind of skills they require in order to become a plumber, if that's where the skills requirements are. Also considering how warehousing and logistics is also an area of the labor market that is highly likely to be affected by automation. So it could be a win-win for both parts. Getting transition somebody that is an area that is at risk of automation into an area where there is high demand. And what we are seeing here, that there are a number of skills that may be required, obviously around plumbing and plumbing systems, and also knowledge of the construction sector, which not necessarily skills that you develop when you work in warehousing. But we also see that it is not just a transition that would help meet a demand, but somehow it's also a gain for the worker themselves, as some of the roles within the construction sector are paying wages that are above those of warehousing and other workers. And here, for example, in this case, there's almost a £7,000 gain for getting through this transition. Lastly, life sciences. So this is a sector that I personally spent a lot of time looking at in the past year for different projects. And one of the things that strikes me when it comes to life sciences, and especially the cutting edge research and innovation roles, pharma, biopharma, medtech within the sector, these are not jobs that are spread across the UK that we find everywhere. They're actually very concentrated in specific areas. And this is because businesses benefit from clustering with one another, as research and development require proximity for spurring innovation. And here you see what are the areas of the country that see the largest concentration of jobs within the life sciences sector. No surprise, a lot of these areas are within the southeast of England. Oxfordshire and Cambridgeshire play a big role, also because they're close to universities that are heavily invested in R&D related to the life sciences. And this again is really important for businesses, as they can draw from and learn from the university and the talent that is available to them there. And to that point, last slide in terms of trying to understand how the research we've been doing and our data can help with the Skills England agenda. One of the key challenges we saw for life sciences is how do we meet the requirements in terms of job roles that are critical in order to see continued growth in the sector and maintain the position of the UK as a leader in life sciences across the world. And here, what we did was we tried to look for profiles, social profiles, so the kind of information that you and I would put on the web about the jobs that we do, related to a number of occupations that are linked to the life sciences, such as researchers, technicians related to medtech and biopharma, for example. And we try to look at where else in the world we can find people that have these talents and these skill sets. And what we see is that if I were a UK business struggling to find talent within the UK, I'd have a number of options in terms of parts of the world where I could draw talent from. The US, obviously, also because of its volume and size, has a large number of researchers, technicians related to the life sciences, but also there's a lot of hotspots in Europe, in Australia, as well as in India and South Africa related to the life sciences. So trying to attract skilled talent from abroad internationally will be critical for the sector, and understanding where to draw this talent from is particularly helpful for businesses that are trying to innovate in this sector. So then trying to bring it all together here, for me, there are three key takeaways from the research that we've been conducting. The first one is that the biggest skills changes are happening in the labor market, but they're not happening at the same pace everywhere. But we're seeing the biggest changes in occupations linked to IT and computer science, whereas other parts of the labor market that tend to be a little bit more labor intensive, such as transport, construction, and education, have seen the smallest changes. Um, the fact that there are a lot of skills changes or big demand targets in some of the sectors that are currently a key priority for Skill England and for the UK as a whole, as a country, demonstrates an urgent need for upskilling and retraining, with programs that are aligned to labor market needs. And this doesn't just mean in terms of we need, say, more plumbers, let's do some plumbing courses, but also it means in terms of the type of courses that employers need. So again, it goes back to maybe it's adult training, maybe short courses, doesn't necessarily have a long course to tap this immediate demand and stay agile. And in that sense, then the third takeaway is around how data and insights that are taken directly from employers, because that's what job postings are at the end of the day, play a critical role in helping us identify the growth and emerging skills that are needed in different parts of the labor market to ensure that we have a future-ready workforce, but also future-ready country.
Thanks, Elena. And I think we'll move to conclusion now. So that's been a fascinating piece of research as always, and thank you for those insights. I think the so what is aimed, at our wider ecosystem across the UK now. So I think, like we've talked about a few times, I think agility is absolutely key to meeting the educational challenges. So like we've said on many occasions, it's not about abandoning the traditional qualification framework, but how can educators, awarding bodies, regional and national funders have enough flexibility to add and develop skills into provision or develop bespoke skills-based provision, and how do they work with employers? We've seen in the last government and this government that employers are right at the centre of that skills central piece, skills devolution piece. And so how do we work quickly with employers to understand those skills and adapt programs to meet that skills need? Collaboration, as always, we've talked about that a lot. I've talked about that a lot. It's not just a kind of university problem or a college problem or a training provider problem. It's everybody collaborating together. There is demand sometimes for higher level skills, so that's where our university colleagues will come in. Sometimes it's about the kind of higher level technical skills where colleges come in, and sometimes it's about that kind of online soft learning where independent training providers have really kind of developed a really firm offer across the UK. But it's how do they work together with those employers, with central government to make sure that we help those workers to succeed and we help businesses to grow. And then the final one, which obviously you would expect us to talk about for employers, though, is data driven decision making. I think it's important that employees can look at our data, work with education and central government customers that use our data to really keep an eye on the pace of change. We've talked about a couple of different research pieces. We know there's a lot of change happening. We know roles are massively evolving, and so using our data, using our insights to kind of track that and get ahead of that curve is absolutely critical for employers to meet the change of the labour market and the economy. Our report, Elena and colleagues have done a fantastic job in pulling this together. Our report is available to download, so the UK Skills Revolution. Following this webinar, definitely recommend, obviously, you download that. And if you've got any questions, if you're an existing customer, reach out to your rep. If you're not, reach out to our sales team. We'd be happy to answer any questions around that. And then this is the start, really, of a kind of 3-month kind of theme around skills. So Elena mentioned the AI one that we did towards the end of the year. Obviously, we've got the webinar today. We've got lots of innovation groups for our existing customers. So within our further education, higher education, government and welfare to work markets, there'll be specific innovation groups where we'll be talking about this agenda and what that means to each of those markets. There's a training session with my colleagues, Alex and Lester, where we start to look at skills taxonomies within the system, how people can gain insight out of things like analysts and get that taxonomy insight. There's another webinar really around kind of powering that skills revolution around taxonomies. So join me and Elena again talking about taxonomies. Elena does most of the talking because she's definitely the brains out of the two of us, but we'll be talking around our taxonomies and why now it's really important that we stick to a central taxonomy and a truly global taxonomy as change is coming thick and fast. And then I'm really looking forward to this one at the end of March. Both me and Elena will be hosting some customers and some essential stakeholders from some big national lobbying bodies, hopefully a few people from kind of regional government, where we'll be talking about that landscape. And no doubt there'll be lots of political updates and change between now and March to discuss in that round table. Again, that's only open to our existing customer base, but I would definitely recommend, if you're not a customer, it would be good to be a customer and be available to that one, because I think that would be a fascinating online conversation. And finally, just for me to thank Elena. Thank you, Elena, again for the awesome work that you do and the insights that you provide us around thought leadership. And thank everyone for joining us today, and look forward to seeing everyone at the next webinar. So thank you.
Thank you.